Hey everyone, it's Blake with FicheBait. In this video, I'm going to walk through some of the new features released in the Forms 12 Spring 2025 release. This release includes features like checking if a workflow was invoked by Forms and if it was running in test mode, invoking a Forms process in test mode, and OAuth for email and web services. Alright, so to start, in Forms version 12, you now have the ability to run a Forms process in a test mode. This is great, so you can actually walk through, you can change who the user tasks are going to be assigned to without hard coding them in a production environment. You can change emails, all of that great stuff. The problem was when it came into workflow, you didn't have a way of running it in test mode and workflow. So with the Spring 2025 release of Workflow 12, we now have that ability. So I have a workflow here that's pretty simple, and I've gone in and in the workflow properties, I've told it started by Laserfiche Forms, and I have a conditional decision here. And in this conditional decision, if I come in, I can look at the tokens, and in the input parameters, you can see that there is a token called isBpInstance in test mode. And it's simply a true or false. So with that selected, you can see that I have this set as true, or I could choose false. So if it's true, or if that condition is satisfied, right, it will go down that branch, and then you can do all these different things. So you can start adding these to your production workflows in order to run a workflow in test mode if it was kicked off by a Forms process in a test mode. This can help you, especially if you're writing to production databases or making changes to things. You may not want those to happen if you're running in test mode. So you can now take care of those situations with this ability. You can also invoke a Forms business process in test mode, since that's been available for a little while in Forms. So with the invoke business process activity in workflow, you do what you usually do. You would select your form server, go through and select your fields, and now you can see that there's a start options checkbox here. So you can run in test mode, and that will kick off that Forms instance that gets created in test mode in Forms. So pretty nice to have there. The third activity that I have on here is applying stamps. So stamps applied by workflow now support Laserfiche tokens such as date. So we can see here we have our token dialog, and we can see our different tokens that we have available. So that's a nice little update as well. Some of the other features that have been added, we're going to go over to the Workflow Administration Console. And the first one we're going to look at is email. And if I manage email servers, I'm just going to click Add. And if we look at the authentication type, you can now see that Workflow 12 now allows for Microsoft 360 Auth 2.0 and Gmail OAuth 2.0. So if we select that, you can see the interface changes. It's updated to accept the client ID, tenant ID, and client secret. And then a little bit different for Gmail. But a lot of those services have switched over to using OAuth. So you can now use those with Workflow 12 in this release. So a much needed add for those of you that are using hosted email servers. All right, the next one is web services. In web service, we have pretty much the same thing. So if we come down to custom, we can now use OAuth to authenticate to web services. So before, we basically had to use default authentication and use the following credentials. In order to use OAuth, you would have to do some crazy stuff within your workflows to get that to work. And now it is built in. So you can come in and set all of your OAuth authentication values and use those web services that are requiring it. And then if you were to choose for a web service SharePoint, you can see that with SharePoint, you can now use OAuth authentication for SharePoint Online. And this is used in the SharePoint create delete list item activities. So you would be able to use those now as well. Some of the other things that have been updated, there's better migration support, so import handling for workflows with external objects. There's better support for that. Simplified workflow installation, requiring significantly fewer clicks. When you install workflow, be aware that by default it will use, I can't remember if it's a network or system account. So just make sure that you go and check that if you do need it to run as a Windows account, an AD account. Canvas and toolbar icon modernization. As you can see, all the icons and the look and feel of workflow have been updated. So that's a really nice update. I have been told that there is another update to the icons coming to give it a little bit better contrast for the Workflow 12 Fall 2025 release. So look forward to that as well. Workflow validation now includes workflow file count limits for retrieve business process variables so that users are warned if they exceed the limit, which is 20 collections or table fields, before attempting to publish. So some great new warnings there for us. If you are publishing with retrieve business process variables, the same form variable used in two different forms is now counted as a single variable. So that's another great update. If you're using database query activities, there is now a message that is created that shows the count of the results within the message tab. This is similar to using the search for repository activity. And the token picker can now be used for a reply to in an email activity advanced settings. So again, some really great new features in the Workflow 12 Spring 2025 release. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, keep phishing.